do I want to maybe think about custom software and what does that process look like? And then also just like examples for sort of key business need areas of what 10 Forward uses. And then I also sourced my own community and said, what are your recommendations for good software in these categories? So we'll look at some of those. Definitely ask questions throughout. I have the chat pulled up here in my other monitor. I want this to feel more like a conversation and less like me just straight lecturing at all of you. So first we're going to look at how do I even evaluate software? So luckily we don't go into a store and see like these rows and rows of CD-ROMs anymore. It's gotten a little bit better than that. But it still can be really hard when, there's 50 different options to do one type of work. Like, how do you know which one is right for you? First, we're going to see, do we even need new software to do this, right? How do we make that decision of, okay, we've been using, this process for so long and it's not working. It's time to put the money and time into finding a different solution. So things to think about is the existing software that you're using or the lack of software, a manual process contributing to missed revenue. So are there features or services that you're unable to currently offer that your clients have told you that they would like? Is it constraining your growth? So are you finding that it's having a hard time keeping up with larger workloads or bigger amounts of data or just more staff? Is there lower productivity? So maybe the software you're using doesn't have good workflows for common tasks that you do over and over. And so everything is taking longer than you feel like it should. Is it introducing frustration, right? Is it hard to learn? Is the interface not very user-friendly? Does it take forever to onboard someone? Is there poor tracking? So it's hard to see who's made changes to what or who has accessed what files, things like that. So all of these are kind of questions you can ask to make that determination. Should we bring software into a process that doesn't currently have it? Or is it time to switch out the software we've been using for a specific process or task? So if any of those, you're like, yes, this is true. This is a thing that's happening at my business. Well, then where do I start? We're gonna make lists because lists are everyone's best friend. So first, what are the core needs? And for this, I think it's really important to focus, and this is hard to do, but to try and focus not on how you want to solve a problem, but what is the actual problem itself. So maybe the problem is, or the need that you have is, I want to be able to schedule an event. So try not to get too into the weeds with like, okay, I want to pick a date from a dropdown versus I want to select from an interactive calendar, right? Like really honing in on what is the actual need that I must have this software handle for it to be viable. And this is a great place to bring in the staff who are going to be using that software the most often. So figuring out, just polling people, like, what are the things that you use the software for the most? What do you wish that it would do for you? And speaking of wishes, the next list that I think is good to make is, what are your nice to haves, right? Because while there are things that it has to do to work at all, it'd be great if it did a little more than that, right? So prioritize your nice to have so that you know which ones are the most meaningful for your organization. And that's also really hard to do, is to say, well, which of these is most important? So we like to play a game when we're working with clients who, maybe have a list of features and I don't know which one, is a higher priority. Is it really just do like, would you rather have A or B? Whichever one gets up, put it up. Okay, great. You said B. Okay, would you rather have A or C? A? Okay, we'll keep A there. What about C or D? And just working your way down the list and just kind of forcing yourself to just make a decision. What's your budget? Right? Which seems kind of obvious, but I think it's easy when we're exploring new things to be like, oh, like I know this is a little higher than we thought, but like it has all these cool features and it's like so nice and shiny and it's really modern and it's great reviews. Like, no, don't fall into that trap, right? You set your budget for a reason. It's what you can afford and you have to work within that. And it's a lot easier to do that if you do that before you've started looking at all, so that, you're making it based on good financial data. And then tech support, this is a huge one. So if you have a team that is lower tech literacy, or you work with a lot of volunteers, or you have folks who are all at kind of different stages of their tech experience, making sure that you have a software platform that has more documentation, maybe comes with tutorials, support is built into the subscription model. Those are going to be more important considerations. If on the other hand, your tech team is really savvy, then that's not going to be as important. And so there's software that you can keep in the running that you might have otherwise ruled out because they didn't have a lot of that built-in support. And then what are your values? And so this this can get tricky because there are no like perfect companies where everything lines up with the way that we like to do things. But especially for, millennials and Gen Z, they want to feel that when they're in the workplace, they are matching their values with the work that they're doing. And so doing, even just preliminary research to make sure that a company doesn't have a history of, being sued for discrimination or, things like that. Like what are ways that we can try to align this company with the values that we've established that are part of, our mission as a business. And then it's time to do research. At this point, I think, you have your list, you have your budget. So pick a couple of viable options and just see if they're actually going to be a good fit. And this is a great project for an intern or a more junior employee, because again, they have all the criteria laid out. So they're just kind of fact checking essentially at this point. How do you find those viable options? So some places that I like to look are Wired magazine, New York Times does a lot of tech reviews, PC Mag does lists all the time. And then sourcing your community, right? So the folks on this call, Middleton Chamber, just what do y'all use? What do you like? What should we look into? And so for each of those options that you've selected that might work on your list, you're going to do the following steps. So, first one I think is obviously, does it match your core needs? And if it doesn't, probably right away, you can cross that off and move on to the next one. Is it within your budget? And when we say this, there's things to think about besides just the stated like monthly subscription plan or yearly subscription. Are there any hidden training fees? So this is something that sometimes is not included and you have to pay extra for, especially if we're talking about like enterprise solutions. Are you going to want any kind of customization of that software? Because oftentimes there's going to be an extra fee associated with that. And then ask for any deals, right? Especially if it's a younger company who doesn't have as many clients yet, like they might be very willing to meet with you where your budget is and figure out a way to kind of meet you where you need to be. And then can it scale with your company? So this is a big one too. Some folks are talking about how they're trying to hire. Is this software solution going to grow with you? So how is the cost modeled? Is it a cost per person? Is there like a range? So, okay, if you're under 10 people, it costs this flat amount. If you go up to 20, that's going to double because that's going to be a big change if you're only going from like 10 to 11 and suddenly you're paying for 20. Do they have enough storage included? So if it's software where you're going to be uploading documents, what kind of storage capacity comes with what tier of subscription? Do you have to pay extra for support? Are there multiple tiers of support that you can choose from? So all of these are going to factor into how the cost of that platform or software could change over time as your company scales and your needs change. And then asking around, right? So again, talking to people, because there's only so much we can know about software without actually using it. And so there are a lot of ways that we can kind of find more information about something once we've established that, yes, okay, it meets the minimum requirements, it's in our budget, but are we actually going to enjoy using it? So ways to do that. I mean, online reviews is a big one, although of course, all of these kind of come with their own grain of salt, right? If the platform has any case studies on their website, look for one that maybe is a similar need or company to what you are. Did this work for them? Why? What did they find to be the benefits? You can always ask vendors for references, while keeping in mind, of course, they're going to give you people who are the happiest. So again, take that with a grain of salt, but that can still give you some good background information. Social media. So this is something I think that a lot of folks kind of overlook when they're doing their software search, but social media can sometimes tell you a lot about a company. For example, are there a lot of negative comments on their Facebook page? Or are there none, which might mean that they're deleting negative comments. If there are negative comments, are they responding very quickly and like, hey, yes, we're so sorry you had the experience, like, how can we help you? Or are they unanswered? Do they have a lot of, tweets on Twitter about like, hey, we, know that our system is down, like our engineers are working on it. Like, is that happening kind of frequently? Because that might tell you that it's not a very reliable system. So that's kind of an area that I think can be really helpful to get more information about the reliability and also the customer service aspects of a different vendor or platform. And then what does your team think? So again, who's actually going to be using this? Getting that buy-in throughout the process is really important, because anytime that you're switching, a process or to a new system, like there's going to be frustration. It's going to take time. There's always going to be people who don't really like it at first, kind of no matter what you do. So really trying to mitigate that as much as possible from the beginning is going to lead to a much smoother transition, and also just, better buy-in. And again, there might be things that folks are going to point out that you didn't think of, because they're the ones who are in the weeds using it every day. Maybe HR uses it differently than your salespeople do. And so really just making sure that you don't do all this work and come to a decision and feel really good about it, and then someone raises a hand and says, what about XYZ? And so then custom software, right? Maybe you've looked at all the options, you're just not really feeling any of them. Like the one that has all your core needs and nice to haves is pretty expensive, or you just can't find something that you feel like meets all of your core needs. And so maybe you're wondering, like, should we just build something that does exactly what we want the way that we want it? A lot of times the answer is no. And you might think that's weird coming from someone who makes their living writing custom software. But again, we don't want to spend our time and the client's money writing something that no one's actually going to use, because it turns out it wasn't meeting their actual business needs. So if you find yourself saying something like, well, XYZ is fine, like it works well enough, but it doesn't have the top nice to haves that we would really like. Can you use 2 apps instead of 1? Is there another app that kind of meets that gap with the nice to haves, and you're able to create a workflow using the 2 different pieces instead of trying to find everything that you want in one piece of software? Can you create the bridge yourself? So I don't know if folks are familiar with Zapier. See a couple of nods. So that's we've used that for 10 forward. It's like, okay, well, I really just need this one thing to happen. Can I just sort of bridge the gap, make it happen myself using something like Zapier? So examples, if people aren't familiar with Zapier, you can sync your social media accounts and like your Slack, and anytime someone mentions you on social media, it can automatically post to a specific Slack channel. Or hook up your PM software. So if you're using Trello or something, when you finish a project, it can automatically send out a survey because you've connected to like SurveyMonkey or something like that. So a lot of different use cases for Zapier that can often kind of tide you over if there's really only 1 or 2 things that you're missing. And then lastly, suggest it. So we have a couple of different products that we develop and sell directly to clients at 10 Forward. And almost all of the new features come from the existing clients, because we want to keep them as clients. They know the software really well. They're sort of our key demographic. So if there's a feature that they think is a good idea and they can present a clear reason as to how that would help their business, like we're more than happy to add that. So it never hurts to just reach out to an existing vendor or software company and just say, hey, here's what we would like. Is there any chance that y'all could add this to your product? If you find yourself things like, well, XYZ is fine, but we really want it to be personalized. We want our company branding. This is something that's client facing, and we really want to have like our name on it. White labeling might be a good option. So I don't know if people are familiar with white labeling, but it's basically the same product under the hood, but it has that company branding. So maybe the colors are your company's colors. It has your logo. For mobile apps, oftentimes you can actually download it from the App Store under the company name, but nothing else for the most part is different. It's really just made to look and feel to the client, to the user, that it's a personalized app created by your company, but you don't have to pay nearly as much to have that because it's already built and it's just putting your name on it. On the other hand, if you find yourself feeling, well, nothing is really meeting our core needs, and it's starting to have a tangible impact on our revenue, then that's where custom software might be a good solution. So really quickly, I'm just going to kind of walk through, if you're toying around with the idea that, maybe we do want to build something custom rather than go with an existing off-the-shelf solution, how do we even decide that? If you feel like there's a market for that software industry where you're like, okay, I always hear accountants complain about how none of the existing choices can do XYZ, and we all have to do it by hand, or we have to have a complicated Excel sheet or things like that. try and validate that idea. We've had multiple clients who came to us originally to build a solution for their business specifically. So in one case, it was a personal trainer who owned his own gym and didn't like the personal training software that existed. So he came to us and had us build it for him. And then as his clients moved to other gyms, they told their trainers about this software. And now more of his business is in running the software company than in running his gym, because he identified a key need in his industry and was able to fill it. What are the potential financial benefits of going custom? So increased productivity. If it's customer facing, is there a potential impact on customer retention or acquisition? Again, if this is something that you think is filling a definable need in your market, is there any potential revenue from selling it as a product? And then what are the potential costs? And so obviously there's the upfront cost of just developing the software, but then all software has support and maintenance. So that's something to factor in going forward. Any internal costs. So if you're developing it in-house, obviously there's costs associated with that. But even if you're hiring external contractors to build it, you're still going to have someone who's making, the product decisions. Maybe you're doing design in-house, there's always going to be internal costs associated with that. And then if you do decide that you want to sell it as a product, what kind of marketing budget do you have? There's money that's necessary to kind of make that part of it work as well before you can get any of that revenue potentially coming in. And then for the final section, what is 10 Forward use, and what are some of the recommendations that people sent my way when I asked this? So for HR software, we use Gusto, which I cannot sing the praises of highly enough. The reasons why we like Gusto are it has a clean design, it's super responsive support. As soon as we open a ticket, we hear back the same day from a real person. And they've solved every problem that we've had. It's been really fantastic, and it's really focused. So it's not trying to be everything to everyone. Community recommendations that came in were Zenefits and Workday. People in particular seem to really like Workday. That one got a lot of praise from folks. Project management software. We use Basecamp. Again, it has a really intuitive design. It's easy to find things. It's very communication focused, which was something that we had identified as a core need. Was we didn't want to just have a storage system like Google Drive. We really wanted a way for people to easily be able to communicate about different projects and tasks and documents and things like that. Community said that Monday.com and Zoho projects are really great. And we've actually thought about moving away from Basecamp. Partially because there are some features that are missing that are kind of nice to have at this point, but kind of moving more towards core needs. But also, the values that I mentioned, they have made some decisions recently that we don't really feel like line up with our values. And so, that can have an impact on employee retention. And so we're looking at, okay, is this egregious enough that we want to start exploring some of these other options? And, Monday.com is one that I think I'm probably going to check out because a lot of people have said it's great, so might as well see. And then marketing website software. So by that, I mean software to make a marketing website, not marketing software that makes a website, because I've had some confusion over that. There's sometimes the same thing, but they often have different functions. So this is an example where, we're a consulting company, but we are, we build custom software, but most of the time it just makes more business sense for us to buy someone else's, right? Because we're not experts in all of these different areas, and the folks building HR software they are. So yeah, we're going to take advantage of that. This was an area where we found that our core needs and the core needs of our clients were not being met by existing software. So we did decide to go that custom route. So we built our own CRM called The Bridge. And the core needs that our clients had identified that weren't being met were that they wanted something they couldn't break, unlike WordPress in a lot of cases, and they wanted something that was highly customizable, and also where they didn't have to do the changes that they didn't want to. So sort of this concierge platform idea. Other community recommendations that came in, I think most people are probably familiar with WordPress and Squarespace. I've used both of those, and they're really great at what they do. They're just more limited. So yeah, that's kind of what I had. Does anyone have any questions about anything I've talked about, or just any kind of general tech and software questions?
Laura, I have a question. So if somebody is starting to kind of do the must-have, like to have need to have, like to have, wish to have list.
Mhm.
And you're doing the research, you're comparing the costs, whether it's monthly, annual, what have you. And the final category is customizable software, customized software. How do you start to understand what that looks like cost wise? Is it, if it's fully, can you say if it's, X amount of hours, it will range between here and here? Or how does somebody figure that out?
Yeah, so for customizing existing software platforms, a lot of times people will, companies, vendors will have, they should be able to provide you a list of options. So if you want to have, your logo and your colors, it's going to be either X configuration fee, or it's going to be an additional, $10 per month or something. They should have that all spelled out for you. So that's something you should be able to ask for, and they should be able to provide. If it's not something that they typically do, but they're open to it, then it might be more of a conversation. And in that case, it's good to know ahead of time, like, what exactly do you want customized? Do you want to, are there certain features that you would be willing to pay a little extra for, depending on what it costs, because it's top ranked, nice to have for your staff? Or are you just looking for more cosmetic kind of customizations? So it really depends on the different type of software. And a lot of software too has different tiers where it's like, okay, this tier comes with, these features, this tier comes with these features. And this, this third tier, like premium tier, comes with all of these. So, so most of the time, I think that for established software products, that information should be available. You might have to request it, but it should be available. For going completely custom, it just really depends. So we usually say 10 forward that it's hard to do anything for less than 10 grand. But I mean, you'll get all kinds of estimates from all different places. And something that kind of goes into that too is if you're looking to do like a mobile app or a web app, because those are very different processes and the costs are going to be super different depending on that. Is it, internal facing, or is there an internal and an external component? Because those make a big difference. And then there are certain types of features that tend to be more expensive. So anything having to do with collecting money from other people is just inherently more expensive, because there are a lot more safeguards that have to go in place with that, because you're working with financial data. Same thing if you're doing anything related to HIPAA data. And then anything with like lots of tiers of permission levels, also just the configuration is more complicated. So that tends to up the price tag as well. But most, like we've worked with a lot of custom shops in town, either working on projects or just through professional organizations and stuff. And at least locally in Madison, like folks are really willing to work with small businesses and startups, because, it's that rising tide raises all boats, right? So a lot of times if you have a budget in mind, and again, you say like, here are my core needs, that you can kind of work through together and figure out how to get what you need built in your budget most of the time,
Sure, perfect, thank you. Any other questions for Hillary? This has been really good information for, just kind of laying out the thought process of, what do we need, researching which platforms give you those needs, and then almost like a worksheet for a consultant or an organization like yours to say, okay, here's the research we did. Here's what we found, here's what it's lacking, and then being able to provide that to you so you can give them an intelligent response right away as to whether or not, it's going to be 50,000 or 10,000, range
Yeah.
that will be in.
Yeah. And we've definitely told clients sometimes who are like, hey, I want to do this really cool thing. And we're like, you could just use Google Sheets for that. Like that actually, you're overthinking this, you're over engineering it. Like this will work fine. And then we've had clients, there was one potential client who ended up with COVID having to push everything back a year. But they came to us with the opposite, and they were showing us these super complicated, extensive spreadsheets, and they had like 50 different ones, and they had to tie into each other and really complicated formula. And these are social workers. you know, so it was just, that's where they'd kind of taken the sort of, you know, free or low cost option as literally as far as they could go. And at that point, it was affecting their business. And so that's when they were kind of like, okay, yes, we need to go custom. We've taken, you know, this was working great for a long time until it wasn't. And I think that's something that comes up too. You know, I was mentoring for one of the generator cohorts, and he was asking me, he's like, do I need to invest in custom software? And I was like, well, what are you doing right now? And he said, well, I'm using, you know, this software for this part of my business, and this software for this part of my business, and this software for this part of my business. And ultimately, it kind of came down to, you know, if you think that this is going to keep working for the next 3 or 4 years, then that's probably sufficient, because for you to get all of those different pieces into one custom software is going to be pretty expensive. If, on the other hand, you expect that your growth is such that in a year, this is just not going to be sustainable or sufficient to meet your needs, then this is the time to start building it so that you have it in place before you hit that point. So.
Very good.
Hillary, quick question. You know, back in the day before, I don't even know if you were born yet, before Facebook and Yelp and whatever other review systems, Consumer Reports, you know, you'd look into it and you'd say, okay, what about this fridge? What about this stove? Blah, 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 blah. Is there a trustworthy online resource for stock software for evaluation purposes?
That's a great question. I think really the solution that I found, because I find that there are places that are, you know, and I listed some of them that I generally trust what they say, but I feel like too, software is, because it is so customizable, it's, people have a lot of strong opinions about it. And so you know, I feel like with a microwave, for example, like, yeah, there might be some features that you want in like a high-end microwave, but that kind of does the same thing, right? There's not a lot of, people don't have a lot of strong opinions about microwaves, you know? But software can be tailored to such an extent that it's hard to know if someone's glowing review would actually be a glowing review from you for the exact same product, because you're going to use it different ways and have different needs. So one of the ways that I kind of get around that is, you know, looking at those sites that I do like, where I found in the past, you know, yes, we line up, or I'll look at existing software that we're using that I really like. Did they also give that good reviews? Because that kind of says maybe we have some of the, you know, we're looking for some of the same things broadly. And then also, what is software that shows up on multiple lists? So for example, I was looking at, you know, I mentioned we're maybe switching our project management software. And so I Googled best project management software 2020 list, something like that. And there were I looked at like 3 different lists of like top 20 of 2021, and only 2 or 3 actually showed up on all 3 of those lists. And so to me, that was a good indicator that either they were shelling out a lot of money to be included on these lists, or they actually had legit good software that had more universal appeal. So that's a strategy that I use sometimes too, is I just look at a lot of lists and I see, okay, which ones are showing up consistently, because that means that there's a higher chance that it's actually quality software and not, you know, too niche.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else? We will stay on for a few minutes. And then, Hillary, do you happen to have the closing slide that we can put up? So again, I want to thank our sponsors, TDS, Amplify Digital, and Monona Bank. A couple of upcoming events. Networking Blitz is coming up on May 18th. That's at 3 o'clock. It's a really good way to network one-on-one. It's kind of like speed dating for networking. You'll meet with 7 people during the meeting, each for about 7 minutes. And that's something that we tested out, people really like. So I encourage you to sign up for that if you're looking to make some more connections. And then member favorite, Get Moving Milton is on June 3rd, and we'll have just kind of open free for all networking at 7:45. And then we also have breakout rooms for that. So you'll get to learn something and make connections there as well. We will send out, Hillary, are you willing to share the slides?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yep, so I'll get the slides out to you guys. We did record this, so we'll also be on our YouTube channel. And then we'll also send a list around of attendees. So another way, it's kind of our virtual business card swap, since we can't do that. If you don't want your contact information included on that list, please reach out to me by the end of the day tomorrow. And my email address is kate@middletonchamber.com. If I don't hear from you, you'll just automatically be added to that list. And we just ask that you use the contact information to connect one-on-one, not just to kind of mass email, or people get kind of upset about that. So if you have any questions for me, I'm always here. Feel free to reach out. If not, have a fantastic weekend. I think Mother Nature is going to be kind, and we're going to get some nice weather and get out there, do some yard work, get that vitamin D. Paul, don't hurt yourself doing that yard work. Thanks, everybody.